tuning in from for today's. Welcome everyone, and please say hello in the chat. Let us know where you're tuning in from for this week's Madafeh at the Palestine Museum US. I'm Krista Brune, a volunteer for programming, and I'm tuning in from Madison, Wisconsin, where spring is on the mend here. We're getting close. In the meantime, I have orchids to inspire me. There's always life unfolding. We have Enver joining us from Oakville, Ontario, Canada. Welcome, Enver.
Okay, Krista, we're a little over 5 minutes here, so getting ready to start. Welcome, everyone. I'm Faisal Saleh, the founder and executive director of the Palestine Museum US in Woodbridge, Connecticut, USA. I'd like to welcome everybody for today's Madafeh program. And to get it started, Krista Brune would give us an introduction to our guest today. Krista.
Welcome everyone to this week's Madafeh at the Palestine Museum US. We have a very special guest today, Steve Sabella, who is an award-winning photographer, mixed media artist, and writer, who was born in Jerusalem. He's joining us today from his home and studio, or his studio in Berlin, where he currently lives. And Steve has exhibited all over the world. You can find his work in the permanent collections of the British Museum in London, at Madafeh, the Arab Museum of Modern Art in Doha, the Arab World Institute in Paris, the Bahrain National Museum, and elsewhere. Steve uses his photography to create large-scale photographic works, collages, and mixed media pieces that draw on themes of the Palestinian diaspora and Israeli occupation, exile, and more generally, the Palestinian experience. As a writer, Steve reflects on the art world and is also the author of the award-winning memoir, The Parachute Paradox, which won the 2017 Eric Hoffer Award and the 2016 Nautilus Book Awards for Best Memoir. Steve also created a photo essay entitled Palestine Unsettled, in his own words, the Palestine that once was, and the Palestine that thrives in our spirit. He is also about to release his latest work, The Artist's Curse, and we will be showing an image of the covers of his works. There's also a catalog of the March of Return, the Great March of Return, which is one of his works of art right behind him. Steve is one of the few official photographers of the Second Intifada and has used his photography as artwork to increase understanding of his homeland. There you see the covers of all of the books that he has produced. I first connected with Steve following the death of a Palestinian artist, Leila Shawa, who's from Gaza originally. She died last October. And anyway, we connected, and I'm so honored to have Steve join us today to share with us about his work. And we will have time for questions once he gives us a little sampling of his artwork. So without further ado, welcome, Steve, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Krista, Faisal of the Palestine Museum US, for hosting me. I'm happy to share my experience. So let's get started, and maybe I start that I was born in the old city of Jerusalem, and I've lived there at least 32 years of my life, feeling in exile, in complete alienation in my city of birth. So like my journey started from there, like questioning, like let's say identity, questioning my location, my place, feeling like I live like in exile in my own city of birth. So when I moved to London to seek my higher education, I felt I had double dose of alienation in London. And I think this alienation probably created maybe, I transformed all my experiences in my life stages into visual art. So we can speak about the art projects if you wish. Are you with me?
So Steve, are you going to start by sharing your screen, or do you want to start with a discussion?
You can start the discussion and we can go like forward.
Okay, wonderful. Well, you already touched on this feeling of being in exile, even in your homeland. Yeah. I wonder if you could tell us about your choice to live in Berlin and and how your work and how living in exile affects your work, your connection to place, and your sense of home.
I mean, strangely enough, all this journey of alienation, not feeling at home, taught me that, we are all born somewhere, but it's up to us at one point, to feel home somewhere. It cannot continue like this, even though in my case, like I'm living in Palestine and feeling not at home. So what is the answer to a person like me who's seeking life, who's seeking to live like everyone else? So I saw myself like uprooting myself, from my city of birth. But then I understand in life, we can't just uproot ourselves. We have to root ourselves somewhere. And I found out that the best way for me to live life is to root myself in the clouds, to always remain free and transition. And this way I see myself, like people ask me, where do you come from? I say, where do you come from is a bit tricky. You can ask me where I was born, and the answer will always be Jerusalem, Palestine. But where I come from, I feel like I come from everywhere and nowhere. And if people insist, I say I come from elsewhere. Like somewhere else. And I think, artists, we look at ourselves but in fact, it's like our vision is like for many others, like we all want to live with dignity. We all want to live with our free imagination. And I realized, living in Jerusalem, the imagination itself was very much colonized, and if the imagination is colonized, then how can we free the land? So I saw my quest as how to free my imagination first, given that I know that the body is occupied and the land is occupied. But what's more dangerous for me was that the imagination of the Palestinians, of people in general, was also colonized. So I used art as a practice, how to free the imagination or free images from the predetermined readings of them, And let me show you now an example of a project I called actually Elsewhere, done just in 2020. I'll share my screen and we start from Elsewhere. Okay. And yeah, the land and the imagination. Now, what we're looking at, these are black and white images from 19th century and early 20th century Palestine, Syria, and Lebanon. Okay, and these photochromes were done in the past in black and white, but when they were in Europe, they wanted to show people how the land looked. So they mechanically colored them, giving them the illusion of reality. So what I did is I was curious how the land of Palestine might have looked before its colonization, before the coming of all these structures all around, especially the separation wall. So I did cut the images from Syria, Lebanon, and Palestine, and I put them together. And here, for example, for me, this is from Tiberias area. I can imagine that Tiberias might have looked like this 200 years ago, okay? And for example, this is Jerusalem, the old city, and with a hill from Lebanon at the backside. I can imagine, Jerusalem also might have looked like this before. And this one I like in particular because this is Damascus Gate in Damascus, and in the background, we have Jerusalem's old city. But given the whole region has one spirit, even if I combine different locations, it feels to me that I am just dealing with one land, because the divisions we have today on the land, they are mainly done, by colonial rulers, divide and rule. But I see the land as one huge landscape, it should be open to everyone. And funny, when you look at these photochromes, you find out like secrets, about the place. Like the right one, this is Jericho area. And at the left side, the last building on the left side, there is a hotel there. It was called Jericho Hotel. And that image must have been done 1890 or 1895. It's showing that at that time, there was a guest house for people to rest in during this time. Unlike Mark Twain, because when you read that he came to a land, he found no people. I tell you what it was. They sent him to the desert. They didn't send him to any living areas in Palestine, because if it would have been, this land was populated since the dawn of time. This is, for example, the old city. And this is where I was born and grew up, in this area. And I just added a house from Damascus on the right side up, and it feels as if it's a house in the old city too. Jaffa Gate from the inside at the left side, and from the exterior at the left side and the interior at the right side. But as you can see, like at the right side, I also added a lot of imagination to see how Jerusalem might have looked during the Roman time, during 2000 years ago. And I think I spotted Jesus walking somewhere. Maybe that's the boy. On the left side, you can see it from the back. Yeah. And here we have also, like, I when you look at the interior Palestinian houses or people, you can see in 1948, they had to leave or they were expelled and in a rush. So they left all the belongings there. So when I put these photographs together, it's like tracing a little bit the images, the life of the past, This is the old city at the right side. And whoever knows the old city knows doesn't have this second corridor in it. So I created a fictional space in the old city, knowing that on the left side of the image, this is exactly the window where I was born. Like the right image, the green window, this is exactly the house where I was born. This is like Sur and Seda and Palestine. I saw the separation wall in Jerusalem start from scratch, from zero. And it's so painful for somebody like me who grew up there to see the land transformed into this visual distortion, into something that the eyes, cannot accept. So I see sometimes my art as looking at these things and to give them another look, okay?
It's really fascinating how you look at historical images, and of course you have your own personal concept and experience of Palestine and of the old city of Jerusalem in particular, and then also the experience of watching it transform before your eyes. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how memory gets woven into that, people's concepts of reality and also memory, and how that gets woven into your work.
Well, I did once a project called Jerusalem in Exile, where actually I said I live in a city, in the image of my own city. And I wanted to question back then, like, what is the image of people have of Jerusalem in their imagination? And then you realize what people have in their imagination not necessarily matches anything on the ground, because we all develop images of the place we love. And especially because many Palestinians are forbidden to enter Palestine, and not to mention that the Palestinians living in the West Bank, they're not even allowed to see Jerusalem. I mean, I was shocked, for example, like there are people 20, 30 years that are like half an hour away, 1 hour away from Jerusalem, and they can never visit the city. Now this creates probably a glitch in the mind, or creates vivid imagination of the place that we love. So I like to work with these images and these memories and of these, and sometimes like defy what we have of them. I give you an example of, for example, now let's go to the emperors of Palestine Unsettled, which is a photo journey to Palestine. And here you can see, for example, okay, it's here. Sure. Okay, just show you the opposite now. These are images I have taken in Palestine. Okay, this is Gaza port, and it just so happens, in 2005, I was kidnapped in Gaza by mistake by Palestinians, thinking that I was a foreigner, and it was an ordeal, of course, but I felt I was kidnapped by my home people. Like, what can you do? So these are images I have taken in Palestine, as you said, during the second Intifada. And they mostly saw Palestine a little bit in a different way, not what you expect. And when I've shown these images, it was funny how sometimes young people came to me. I remember particularly a boy, and he said, "Thank you." I said, "For what?" He said, "Thank you for showing me my country, how beautiful it is, because I don't know how it looks, And people live in cities, they don't navigate from one city to the other, especially during the second Intifada, where it was very complicated to be mobile. Now, when people look at these images, but then how do you manage to capture life? I always say, Palestinians' quest was always to embrace life. It was the fight is for the freedom is for to live life, not to kill, not to kill the self. And during my tours all over these villages, to every corner in Palestine, and I was from the lucky ones that I was able to know all of Palestine. Born in Jerusalem, I had access to the West Bank and Gaza at the time, and definitely all Palestinians living in Israel today, and I know the diaspora. So I heard many stories from many different people about life. And here's, for example, the separation wall that was built from scratch in front of my eyes. And look how it zigzags the land, it goes in zigzag, creating this visual, I call pollution.
Mm.
I'm just showing like a few from the book, but also I would like to bring like how the fabric of the land is also connected to the fabric of cloth, where the colors come almost, from, see now, yeah, I think we passed that, sorry, we saw that. Like here, for example, look at the embroidery, Palestinian embroidery to the right, and the facade of the Dome of the Rock, they have similar structure and design, and that I found fascinating to make these connections. Same here,
Wow.
from the Dome of the Rock interior with the Palestinian embroidery. I found the lines continue one another, and if the lines continue one another, I felt that this like the memory is extended from one generation to the other, because the nations remain as long as we tell our stories, as long as we record them in our own way. And I found in art a very great way to record the visual story of Palestine, okay? And here the embroidery for me becomes like paintings. Yeah. Of course, I saw in the book, The Palestinian Center, it's published with only, not even a caption, not even a word about the date, the location. I just wanted the photos to float as they are, but the book is dedicated to one person and to one book. And his name is Muhammad Al-Asad, author of the masterpiece book, Children of the Dew, Atfal al-Nada, Children of the Dew, a book which I'm translating now from Arabic to English. It's in 5 languages, but just it so happens it's not in English. And Muhammad, before he died, unfortunately, he was also translating my memoir, The Parachute Paradox. And we both did not finish, but now I see it as my duty to bring forth his masterpiece, Children of the Dew, which is about that fateful night when Palestine became Israel with a blink of an eye in 1948.
We can see how powerful your photography is, and your eye, your incredible eye for images and seeing what maybe not everyone sees. You've also incorporated other materials into your artwork to create some mixed media. You've even cut up photographs and made them into a collage. I wonder if you could just talk about your use of different materials, fragments, even paint, scrapings of paint from the old city. That you've done some incredible things with different materials and given them new life and given people access to places and understandings of places in Palestine. I wonder if you could talk about that and show us some of those mixed media.
You can see now the Great March of Return, correct? The Great March of Return.
Yes, of course. That's
okay. Now the thing is, I've noticed, like after a while, we become numb to the images that we have, especially from Palestine, because there's a lot of conflict, a lot of horror, a lot of death. Sometimes people, it's just the images die. So what I wanted to give is to give them rebirth, renaissance. So what I asked 5 known Palestinian journalists in Gaza to send me 1,000. And I took the challenge and I sat 1,000 hours collaging these images that you see now, creating all work that is, it has no beginning and no end. And I contrasted these images with photos I took from NASA, from outer space. As you can see, this black area in the back, these are space photos. I just wanted to contrast the prison that is Gaza, the limited area, with something that is infinite, outer space. And to show the people's fight, from this giant prison. As you can see, the work does not show anything Israeli except that tower that you see at the left, where we assume, this is the looking eye. But let me just pass through the images to show you. These are the demonstrations that happened from 2018 to mid-2019, every Friday at the border in Gaza. And I just wanted to put them together, and you can see sometimes like outer space merges with the space. This work also is a short film. In particular, to me, I like this one because it feels like the Pieta of Jesus, especially the upper side where he's being carried. And I like to use here semiotics from Renaissance art so that people can relate to these images and look at them again at a time where it feels they are dead. So doing it like this and the film is animated as well. Like, look at that. I mean, you look at this, and I had a talk yesterday, and many people think, like, let's say Palestinians commit suicide, but you know what? Many Palestinians reach a point where they commit suicide because there is no hope whatsoever, you know, in the reality, and they just go and kill themselves, not only of political reasons, because of personal, you know, self reasons, and that I find very hard to. It needs people need a lot of care after that, because to live under occupation for a long time, it must destroy your brain and imagination. You know, I always, people when just justify the occupation, I ask one question: can you live one day under any sort of occupation in any way? And most of everyone tells you, of course not. So why expect Palestinians to accept this impossible reality? Nobody wants to live under occupation, you know, nobody. It cannot be justified, you know. And this is what's shown in Rizwa Museum recently, including the film. And also it's in the collection of the Arab World Institute in Paris. I always say that is funny because this is one of the works where before I finished it, it was already in the museum collection. When it was seen, that when I was working on it, I shared it with the collector, with Claude Limon, and he immediately said, this has to be in the Arab World Institute collection. And you mentioned that the other project, which is paint from Jerusalem. Let me just go straight to it now. Let me just show you. Look at this. In Jerusalem's old city houses, we are used every summer to paint the house in a different color. I remember my family and me painting the house once pink, once blue, once green, once white, whatever. And every year you have a stack of colors, okay? So what I did is I peeled these layers, and as you can see, they are super fragile. They can break sometimes, as Benicio Porter said from the British Museum, just from looking at them. So what I did is I spread on these fragile pieces black and white photo emulsion, okay? So I made them like photo paper, light sensitive. And then I went to the darkroom and I printed on them images from a house, a Palestinian house that was occupied by Israelis in 1948. So I managed to live in this house for 38 days as a Palestinian, exercising anyway, in my own way, the right of return. So now the images I printed on these fragments are all from this occupied house, but the images are from the Israeli family that lives in there. But what struck me was the kitchen that they have in the house. For my eyes, it looked like a 1948 kitchen, as if left intact. Look at the utensils. These are basically Arab utensils, like the big size, you know, the huge knife. It felt for me as if the Palestinian family was still there, at least in spirit. Now, again, this is black and white photography. The color is an illusion. It comes from the base that I peeled off the walls. Wow. So, yeah, exactly. When I looked at this, I said, wow, what's happening here? This is like the alchemy of photography, okay? Now, this style, as you can see, is actually the left tile in the black and white image you see at the left, okay? Sometimes the fragments were colored, and sometimes they were not. But here you can see the whole process is actually black and white. And that tile is this piece. And so it basically brought the story of the house back to life. And when we look at this one, you ask yourself, are these the images of the Palestinians or of the Jewish family that lives in this house today? But then I say, like, visually, does it really matter? So in a way, now this project speaks about about multiple stories. And it's up to us as viewers, you know, to understand what we want to understand. But it also, when you look at this, like this artwork, it feels like cave art. I saw this work as a research in going back to look at the original images. And here again, you see the spirit of, you see these people, and it's like you wonder, what's happening here? Like traces of the cupboard, you know, look at this cupboard in the middle of the chair. For me, it's like putting pieces of the puzzle together. And you can see that they are like maps, like codes, you know?
Yeah. It's an incredible glimpse into the past that is
Yeah.
also the present, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah,
It's really phenomenal.
a short story. I was, my daughter and I could not speak Arabic, in Jerusalem. It was glitchy for my mouth because I speak English in the house of my partner. But when we were in that house, I wanted to teach her Arabic, in Jerusalem, in that occupied house. Now, the landlord, between quotation marks, suddenly hears, he doesn't know who's renting this house. He doesn't know. He just suddenly hears Arabic in what he believes is his property. And he comes to me, to speak to me, like, excuse me, like, who are you? I said, I'm Steve. And he said, where do you come from? And this time, I did not say I come from elsewhere. I did not say I come from everywhere. No, I said, I come from here. What do you mean? I said, I come from Jerusalem, He said, why are you in the house? He is Arabic, and it's like, he's shocked, why to hear Arabic in his house. And anyway, he freaked out a bit, but then he contacted the people who sublet the house. He said, how can you rent to a Palestinian the house, knowing what you know about Ain Karim? That was in Ain Karim, the house. But you see, I see sometimes art as a practice to look at reality and defy it, And I saw also happen, I do speak Hebrew like Israelis. I learned it on my own, when I was 18, it just took me 2 weeks. And then I nailed the conversation back in Hebrew to his shock, like, what is this person like? Is he Palestinian? Is he Israeli? And what is he about? Just I'm creating art looking at things dynamically. And may I show you this as well, since we are at it. This is, I went to the Holocaust Museum in Poland. And I picked there a wood shard from the train tracks, okay, at Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp. And a piece of wood is what you see in this glass installation, is this upper part, okay? And now, all the remains from the fragments I did for that other project, I collected them in this middle cube, okay? I put them in the middle. And then I put light on a specific light installation to give this like empty identity on the ground, okay? And at the bottom of this glass pillar, there is a mirror. Now you can see it here, there is a mirror. I will show you now what it shows. Let me show you the 4 angles of the thing. And I call this project All That Remains.
Wow.
Collected from Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp on top of what remains from an occupied Palestinian house in Jerusalem. On purpose, I wanted to connect this history together because we cannot disconnect this history if we look at the history of Palestine, okay? Now, when you look at this work, it also feels like a homage to both nations, the Jewish nation and to the Palestinian nation. And sometimes Israelis come to me and say, well, you cannot speak of the Holocaust. And I always say, of course, I will speak of the Holocaust. The Holocaust, anyone can speak about the Holocaust because what happened there is not right. And it cannot just be attributed only Jews or Israelis speak about these impossible crimes in history. But then we need also to speak about the crime of Palestine and what happened to the nation of Palestine, to the Palestinian nation. And here, this work like blends these stories together,
Literally.
Yeah. And here is like under the cube, when you are in the installation, and this was shown in the museum in Rizal, you can see the image of a girl. This happens to be my daughter, and here she is. And maybe just to say symbolically, in the end, humanity is all that remains, Humanity is all that remains. And we need to remember the human side of who we are and to have this understanding. And I do feel like there's no understanding in Palestine or Israel about understanding, our humanity. And that's why we are killing each other, thinking that one side is non-humane and then the other. And this cannot be true.
Steve, I have a question for you. Of all the photographic images that you have taken and worked on, what is the one image that most represents the Nakba?
Funny, because from the project you have mentioned, from the things, probably the Great March of Return, because it's semiotically, it also has it traces the place itself. We can see exactly we're looking at Palestine, and I hardly use flags in my work. I don't believe in nationalism. And actually, if you ask me to draw a flag, I will not have to draw any flag, not including the Palestinian. It just doesn't sit in my brain, you know. But in this work, you will see the Palestinian flag in many places. But I felt it was important to have symbiotic this project visually related to Palestine. Now, this is maybe from the visual part. From philosophically, maybe, or I don't know, artistically, I think the project I showed you before, 38 days of recollection, I don't say one image, it has to be a series of images. When you look at them together, they feel like they are conveying a feeling and a story. And it
do you mind showing it again quickly? Just
okay. Here we go. I mean, it's hard to trace one artwork. Say here, that's one, sorry. Yeah, this project. Yeah, this one. Yeah, because it has a lot of spirit in it.
can you click on it? Oh, there. Okay.
You can see it, yeah. Yeah, it was shown also during this exhibition in Italy, in Verona, since you know Milan, Venice. Yeah. This is at the museum. I had the retrospective some years ago of almost all my art in the museum, and we showed this work there, including here's like I show you from the museum inside this project, which is in the British Museum collection. Here, what I printed on stones, you know, a black and white photo emulsion on stones, and of all the places that I felt were disappearing from Jerusalem to Israeli settlements. This was actually the first project where I print on material that is not photo paper, creating the photo paper on my own. This one's in the British Museum. And I made this photo, printed on the stone. And what's funny, when I looked at the result, it looked like Jerusalem 100, 200 years ago, you know? It feels like an image in time, you know? I like
it's like you're resurrecting the past and merging it with the present.
Yeah, that's why the exhibition was called the Retrospective Archaeology of the Future. Like by looking at images from the past, and we can glimpse at what can happen later. Maybe let me show you also independence. This is when I felt like I was completely free from Israeli occupation from my blood and imagination in 2013. And I made these images with my iPhone. I was in a sea in Croatia, and I was seeing something that's impossible to look at. These are not manipulated whatsoever. This is straight photography, okay? And with iPhone shots. But when I looked at the image, I saw the bones disintegrating. The body was changing, dissolving, and it mirrored my state of mind and body. Because I always said, in order to have change, you need to be malleable for change. You need to break your bones and crush them. You need to stitch your wounds with barbed wire. And in this work, I saw the bones reforming, reshaping, and to create like a new body, a new self. In new, and they were exhibited on screens that we are projecting. We can see the image from both sides. Each screen drops, and then another one comes to show the next artwork. Maybe just show you, like you mentioned, collage works. This is how my collage work started. You know, doing windows in London to express my state of alienation after Jerusalem, and I felt like I had no center point. Like I felt fragmented. I felt it was such a headache. So I wanted to mirror the state of mind of living back then when I felt exile was forever. Lucky me, it was not, because I found my freedom. I found my way to live, feel as if I'm born again as a free human being. And art had a lot to do with it. And you can see, for example, here, feeling in exile. But look what happened shortly after with Euphoria, where I collaged the trees, because I felt they were organic and they changed and they shift. So I felt I was also changing, and I could no longer photograph windows, which mirrored my reality. I was neither here or there. And the trees, I felt it was organic growth. But after Euphoria, I felt like I needed to go into metamorphosis. And what you look at here is the reflection of the separation wall in water. Like it looks like, as you saw before, like a zigzag, but if you look carefully, you see it's actually an image. And I always say we can dissolve these mental constraints in our mind.
Wow.
Yeah, from metamorphosis, yeah. And many of these works are in museum collections. You can see them in many countries. Yeah. And here's when I say I stitched my wound with barbed wire in my memoir, The Partial Paradox. Again, here there's barbed wire that looks almost like Starry Night of Van Gogh. I like to use sometimes aesthetics as a trap to make people like just look at the word and then say what I'm looking at here is actually, oh, I don't want to see this. You know, it feels painful. You know, but then again, life in Palestine is very painful. You know, I always say I had to leave. You know, maybe just to focus on my art. You know, to focus on my text, because living there, it consumes all your energy. You know. Yeah. We can show this for
Steve,
yes, I'm here.
your friend, your dear friend Kamal Bulata, who passed away in 2019,
Yes.
he once said that you use the camera as a paintbrush.
Yeah.
What you just showed me really brings that to mind. Could you just talk a little bit about him and also what he said about your work and how you feel about that comment?
Yeah, I met Kamal like 2002 in Jerusalem, and immediately we developed a connection. For me, Kamal was a great example of a person living with a free mind and imagination. I learned a lot from being with him, and I couldn't help but dedicate my Everland project, which is the one I showed now, to him, just to mirror the generosity of his spirit. This slide, you know, this man, for me, has a lot of light, and I couldn't help but dedicate this project to Kamal, which what we look at is 19th century Palestinian embroidery costumes. These are like 100 and over years old. So I photographed many of these costumes in Palestine, and then I created a new collage of the Palestinian embroidery that almost looks psychedelic, you know, that almost looks as if it represents every other nation, you know, like it can be easily Indian, or it can be Native American, it can be, I don't know, from other countries. And but almost like piano playing. And here they are 9 squares. Everland comes with 9 squares, which you can put in any constellation you want. Straight line together in a grid. And I found out that it comes if you just combine the possibilities of how you put Everland together. Mm-hmm. They are endless. They are endless. And I like that factor. No, Kamal also wrote the foreword of my monograph, the one you have shown before. And I mean, I feel humble when he says Steve's work is a dream to discover, you know. And I like to live reality as a dream and have my dream create reality. And this is how I see my journey, you know, as long as we keep imagining. And I keep repeating this, as long as there is one person who imagines a free Palestine, then Palestine has a chance. As long as there's one person left in the world that imagines a better life, then our life on earth has a chance.
So imagining being free in the parachute paradox, you talk about how every Palestinian is literally carrying an Israeli on their back.
Yeah,
you know, who the Israeli has the power, the Palestinian is subject to that power. How do you tell me about freedom? How you find freedom in that scenario as a Palestinian?
Freedom for me is something that it has to be felt, not said. It's not something to be stated on papers where we declare one day that here, let me show independence while we speak of it. It's not something that should be declared on paper and let's say tomorrow Palestine is free, so we should feel free. If Palestinians were feeling freedom in their imagination, you know, this is all what it needs, you know. You have one free thinker, one free person can inspire many others, you know, to seek that freedom. Let me just show you the metaphor I did for this. Here it is. Where is it? 1 second. Oh, dependence. Bear with me for a second. Dependence. The great march of return. Why I keep losing this project? Okay. Okay, I can't find. Here it is. Here it is. Okay. This project. This is what I actually mirrors the reality we have in Palestine, where they tell you that, let's say that person is Palestinian, like you are in the air, but you're actually tied to all these ropes in the air, giving you the illusion of freedom, you know? Everything is controlled by this power above you, you know? So like you cannot exist on your own except as an extension or as like the second to the Israeli. Like anytime you have like almost as a shows on, let's say, and like I'm happy that you're doing shows on Palestine alone. Like when you bring a Palestinian, you have to bring an Israeli. Why not? Why can't Palestinians just represent themselves? You know, why they can just be on their own? So they tell you the Israeli army left Gaza, but they don't tell you that they left the army at the border to control every aspect of life in the Gaza Strip. You know, people there cannot live a moment without being surveyed or watched, and everything in the life is decided. You can't do anything without Israeli control. Okay, this is like for me an example of life in Palestine, that illusion of freedom. So to go back, just to summarize it, I think we have to feel free. You know, if we don't feel free, there is nothing we can do to liberate the land. And I mean, what else can I say about it?
Steve, talk about how you came up with that parachute paradox metaphor.
Yeah. Oh, right.
I think it'd be interesting for the viewers who haven't read your book to hear that story.
Absolutely,
Maybe it'll inspire them to want to read the whole book.
Yeah, during the second Intifada, I was like in a tandem job. I was doing skydiving in Haifa, okay? And I love that feeling of being free in the air, like, and even to look at the land from another perspective, from above. You know, but then it hit me at 1 second. Am I really free in that air? Because I was in a tandem job with Israeli on my back. At any moment, that Israeli can unbuckle me and I can just die. I mean, little did that Israeli know that, you know, he's actually in tandem job with a Palestinian. I can guarantee to you, had he known that he's in a tandem job with a Palestinian, maybe that jump would have been very different, because like somebody would say, okay, wait a second, you know, I don't want to be with this person in the air, you know. Also, you don't know, I also write in the book, I play with the mind, you know, maybe I could have had something with me, you know, in the air that could be a suicide vest, you know, to explode myself. But I remind the reader that the last thing on earth I want is to kill myself or kill anyone next to me. So this created the metaphor for the book, The Parachute Paradox, where it is actually, it feels like free floating, where actually you're tied to an Israeli on the back, and there is an Israeli on the back of every Palestinian, including those that are living in what we call today Israel, you know, the Palestinian citizens of the state of Israel. These people have huge difficulties living in the state, you know. It's not that the life, okay, like the life is a bit better, but many things on the psychological level and on the equality level in Israel, they are not there. They are not there.
And what did it take you to be able to write? Obviously, you weren't writing all these books originally. You were delving into your photography, your visual art creations, your mixed media. What allowed you to have the space to be able to put words on paper as art? When my partner met me, actually the book is also a love story. It's about my love story with the woman I'm fascinated, I'm obsessed with, still to this day. I met her in 1986 and she's definitely my muse, and she's still my muse. And when she met me at the age of 20, the last thing I wanted on earth to do was get married. But I said, when you see the one, there's no other way except to be. So I defined my mind, because I don't believe in anything fixed in the mind. I said, listen to Steve, in 20 years, if you want to get married, if you by chance want to change your mind, you will never find a person, a woman, a friend, a muse, whatever you want to call her, all these things, like her. So when she asked me, what you want to do, Steve, when I was 20, I told her, I'm a writer. I want to write books, okay? It just so happened, it took me almost maybe 17 years later to pick up the pen and write my first book. But it had to come only after I did so many art projects that dealt with my exile, with my alienation, with my freedom, with the colonization. Once I felt this visual journey, like it was mature, I felt the time has come to express myself in words, but these words are like images, and I like melody, and I like to write with melody, you know, just like maybe with poetics, and straight and to the point. So I wanted to write a book about liberation of the self, of the mind, but I wanted to be like a whisper. And that's why the love story starts with every chapter about my obsession with this woman, and to see how it flows, you know, blending with the political story of the book, where I do speak about crazy things in the book, about my life there, as a participant, as an observer, as a photographer, as an artist, as whatnot. Even it might surprise you, even as looking at the self as an Israeli. Given that I speak also Hebrew, so I also lived life like an Israeli. I was able to cross all checkpoints in the country without ever being stopped, because I felt when I passed my checkpoints, I would not stop
at these places. I'm going from one city to other, which is all the same place for me. So it was natural for me not to put the brakes at checkpoints, which is material. Many people get shot, but I always dared. And because I always dared, I was able to live in the place at least as I wanted to, as natural as possible, even though there's nothing natural about life in Jerusalem or Palestine or Israel. Okay, maybe this brings me to show you a project that I had to deal with in London. And let me just show you, I did a project called Settlement, 6 Israelis, 1 Palestinian, which you can see here, where I photographed 6 Israelis who served in the Israeli army and stripped them down to their underwear. And on the other side of the wall, you see me also in my underwear, you know? So I wanted to create a visual confrontation between these 6 Israelis, which stand almost like in a Holocaust position, against the 1 Palestinian. And Kamal Boulata was in this exhibition, and I remember he telling Lily in my presence, look, Lily, how 1 Palestinian manages to pose a threat on all these 6, he alone. A congratulations on creating, he said, this visual confrontation that with what I showed the Israeli bodies, including myself, without any traces of like signs, except the underwear to speak for itself, you know. And the last thing I want to speak is about the humanity, because I wanted to speak about everything else. The humanity part was the last thing, the last layer in this work. And I believe what it means, you know, why 6, why 1 Palestinian, all this for the people to reflect on all the semiotics of the project. But all I want to say, the making of the work, of this work, was how did the Palestinian manage to convince 6 Israelis to strip to their underwear, you know? I think that was the material for work. And I write this in my memoir. Each dialogue I had with each Israeli, which I only have got to know them 1 by 1. Of course, none of them was paid. They all had to be agreed, knowing the connotations and the complexity of such a project. You know, even one said, okay, I can do it, but I don't know how my family would take it, you know.
Did any of them say no? Did you have to
yes, of course.
ask more than six people? How many people, just roughly, did you have to talk to before you
maybe like
had found 6 people to agree?
Maybe, I don't know, maybe 10, 15, you know.
Yeah.
10, 15. I tend to be very convincing, you know, when I speak. So I'm good with the art of negotiation. And, you know, that room looks like almost like negotiation room, you know, between me and the Israelis. And don't forget, in the middle, it had fluorescent lights, which gave it also the fact, like extra light, that we are in that room. You feel like, I don't want to be here because it looks like an negotiation room.
Now, if you can just convince another 3 million to take their clothes off.
I know. So
well,
to
we start
reduce
with
us all
one,
to our humanity.
1 by 1. We start with 1 by 1, you know.
It's a great
I
metaphor.
Yeah, I always say, if we all do what we can, that's all we need to do in life. We all need to do what we can, nothing less, nothing more, and the world will be a different place. Maybe as an artist, as a writer, I feel I can do more than I can. I push myself to the limits. And speaking of writing, like here is my next book, and it has a line because it's still it's called The Artist's Curse. And if you look carefully at the red, it says the artist's cure. So there is a cure in the curse, and it's on being an artist, navigating the art market and the art world. At least 30% of the book is about creativity, how to deal with the self, how to inject yourself with life, how to deal with, you know, the block or artist ego, or navigating the self in a very complex world we live in. And as you know, as an artist from Palestine, dealing with very hard topics, is not easy to navigate sometimes how you want to talk about your art and your life. But I always tell myself, as long as I speak about my experiences, about my life, everyone can listen, because this is the fact of it.
Is this sense of freedom that you found through your artwork and through, as you say, freedom in the mind, in your imagination, is that what gives you hope for the future?
I mean, I would say art is a great tool for liberation, you know, especially the way I employ it and I use it. And when we look at the history of life, at the history of anything, we always look at the history of art, you know. So art is actually, we cannot, since the dawn of time, we understand ourselves through art. And given that Palestine is a story that never ends, so the stories that artists create, you know, visually, I think are very important to later, even now, to look at the history of this land, you know. So it's a great record, and I hope that the Palestine Museum and others, you know, keep digging deeper and deeper at these experiences. And there are now a new generation that is working as artists, and they are using new techniques and new ideas. And one has to pay attention to what they're doing. I thought I'm a young artist. I just found out lately that, oh, I'm in my late 40s now. What happened? I used to be, so like yesterday, I felt like I was 20 or 30 or 35. So now I feel there's a new blood, which is fantastic, that is looking at, you know, at themselves and at what's happening there. And I hope the visual language is attuned to universal language.
Excuse
It
me.
really seems like, yeah, go ahead,
Krista?
Faisal. Yeah.
Is there anyone in the audience who would like to ask a question in person to Steve? Please raise your hand and we'll put you on. Sorry, Krista, you can go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I was just wondering, you know, it seems like through your artwork, you really invite others to imagine a different future through just through opening their mind. I mean, I think so often the way we talk about, or the news or the world, the politicians talk about Palestine and Israel is very confining. It doesn't allow us to really imagine a different tomorrow. And it seems like your artwork really invites the viewer to just let go of all that, undress themselves metaphorically, and be open to the future. Hello, Evelyn.
Steve. Marhaba. I took this picture in 2017 near the old, the new gate, with the kids coming from school. One of the kids, the boys, said, "Free Palestine." I said, "Please, I don't want you to get stopped." They were so, you can't see the picture. They were, and that's me there. They were so adorable. They were, and I show this picture around. I live in Florida. I'm Jewish. I show this picture around. I have another picture of at Golden Gate in the old city, Rami.
Yeah.
And at the Golden Gate, because I went shopping there, and I took a picture of him with me. And he looked, I said, "Wait a minute, I want you guys to see, this is not a terrorist. Rami is not a terrorist."
Yeah.
So, you know, you know, I've spent many a time in Jerusalem. I lived in Jerusalem for 5 years, and I've been to the old city, and my Hamis is like my best friend, the butcher, and, you know, anyway, I just wanted to share that my soul is, we're all human beings with our own individual souls. And my prayer is that we all fly, that we have all of us have our freedom.
Yeah.
We all deserve it, you know, and I want to thank you so much for the stories of, you know, of going to Auschwitz. And, you know, it's just, I have a book called Nakba and Holocaust, or Holocaust and Nakba, you know, we're so intertwined.
Yeah, I mean, we can't ignore history. Like, I mean, of course, when I see the Holocaust, I say, I recognize what happened, but in the same way, we should also recognize what happened in Palestine. Like, this is called mutual recognition. Yeah.
Why can't we people see?
Yeah.
When I go to in Boca Raton, when I go to a Jewish film festival, and I said, well, you know, I'm left wing, you know, I have to tell you, and they're suspicious of me, and it's like, wait a minute, these people, they have no power. You know, we need to free our minds.
I tell you why we don't see.
Paranoia. I mean, really.
Yeah, I tell you why we don't see, because we need people to be in complete darkness. We need sometimes the wars, the miseries, to feel the other side. But you see, because once we are in the darkness, the eyes begin to see.
Yeah.
That's why, for example, in Jewish history, when they were in dark times, they saw what it means to be human. And that's why, you know, when you are, and the other side as well, when we live in dark times, and Palestinians live in dark times, that's why they are more ready to accept the other side, and less the Israeli side accepting the Palestinian reality.
Any chance of getting your exhibit?
Yeah, I would not exhibit like at this moment, like in this by choice. I studied, you know, art photography in Israeli school in 1994 to 97, and I think in the year 2000, I did exhibit maybe because my political awareness of course, I developed over the years. At the beginning, because I studied in Israeli school, I found it like, okay, I'll exhibit in Jerusalem here or Tel Aviv. But then when I gained like my understanding of the political reality, I had to put a stop to this. But I did say, like, for example, on the project of settlement, 6 Israelis, 1 Palestinians, I will exhibit it in the heart of Tel Aviv, if somebody dares to show such a project with all its connotations, I would dare when it's something like this. But I would refuse to be used, for example, by institutions like, okay, let's have Steve show at an Israeli museum, like in Jerusalem. You see, that I cannot accept, because that's like recognition of a life on the ground, which I don't find correct or just.
I don't understand the one about Tel Aviv where you're saying there's
There's the project
I
on
don't understand the difference.
What the difference? Like it could be also in Jerusalem. It's not the idea, but it has to be in the right place with the right things,
Mhm.
Even though I do believe that art crosses borders, but I don't believe like in the use of identity, to say like to justify it, like that I don't believe, So, but I have to dare with you to tell you something. I did dare and contact the Jewish Museum in Berlin and Warsaw and in Amsterdam.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, I told them I can have a retrospective exhibition of all my art in your museum. Just let me say the story and give me the whole space. And of course, they rejected it. But I did dare as an artist. And as you can see, I have a lot of projects that can speak another language. And they justified it that we just had a show in Jerusalem, but then the next show was still in Jerusalem after. So basically,
they're making choices.
Yeah, they're making
excuses. Hurt to know that people can embrace other people's pain, and when we inflicted it.
Let me tell you something else.
They can't embrace and see and understand this pain is pain.
You see, here I dared because I feel art is universal language, and the way I use it is not like blaming anyone, for anything. But even the museum in Warsaw, he said, yeah, we like Sabella's work to the curator, but we feel that the Israeli embassy will censor the show and they will not accept it.
So okay, so it's political, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, anyway.
But you see, I see my art as the art of being human.
I'm looking forward to seeing an exhibit. Yeah.
One day.
Yeah, I took a picture of the circle one. That was beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Evelyn, for joining us.
I'm sorry, I couldn't. Anyway, there's a book, by the way, Jonathan Kutab, called Beyond the Two-State Solution that I bought. And he's very, very interesting person. He's a human rights lawyer. He's in Jerusalem, I think the West Bank, and in America. And he's talking about a one state, and it's very specific. So I'm going to join the conversation, and I'm excited about that. So
thank you, Evelyn. All right. So Evelyn is going back to the audience. I think we're about at the end of the time. So Krista, unless there's a last minute thing, I would like to wrap up here.
I think just one person wanted to know the name of the author, and I think it's the artist that we were talking about who wrote the foreword for one of your books. If you could just repeat the book that he wrote the foreword for.
Kemal Balata is referring to I think this book. Yeah, Kemal wrote the foreword of this book. Yeah, my monograph. He was supposed to write the whole study, but then it didn't work out for just life reasons. And then we had a writer from the Academy of Arts write the whole text for the book. And through his research, he discovered the work of Kemal and my relationship to him. And he said, I want this man to write the foreword. I said, oh my God. I mean, it just returns back to Kemal, to be his spirit involved in this book. And of course, Kemal, I told him, you need to ask him, because it didn't work out to him the first time. He said, of course, I will ask him. And of course, Kemal said yes with great spirit. So I'm very honored, and humbled that Kemal wrote the foreword. And I know I saw him just before he died, and you won't believe he was full of life. The man was speaking about project about years to come, always busy, always writing, always clear, always in great spirit. So when I came back from Jerusalem to tell him how was my trip there, sadly, Lily, picked up his part of the phone, and she told me, Steve, Kemal just died. I just missed him by by an hour, or something.
Allah yarhamu.
Yeah, I may just say, like Kemal wrote 2 books before he died, like he published 2 books, and Uninterrupted View and There Where You Are Not. I love the titles of these 2 books. I highly recommend them for anyone to understand the work of Kemal Balata and the art, because they are also a collection of essays he did on art from there, and it's like a great look at all his literary work on Palestine and art.
Steve,
Thank you for that.
At the museum, we have 2 works for Kemal Balata, but they're very old. They're before he got into the colors and the geometrics. I want to share them with a photo of them sometime, and then perhaps you could tell me where I can find out more about those 2 works. I tried to get the names of them from him, but somehow our emails got crossed or whatever, and he passed away before I could hear back from him on it. So the question remains.
The question always remains, that's the thing, the question of Palestine, just to, it's the name
Yeah.
also.
Yeah, I will send you the photographs so you can see them.
Sure.
Okay.
Well, I just posted a link to your website because your website just has a wealth of information and images of your artwork, information about your books.
Yeah.
There's a video you can watch of one of your events. And so I just encourage people to learn more about Steve after today and share information with your friends as well. Thank you.
Just for the record, the new website is stevesabella.space.
Okay. I'm sorry. Oh my goodness.
Oh, no, it's okay. The old ones don't
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I actually had that and then I opened the wrong one when I copied it. So forgive me. Thank you for correcting me.
Is space as in outer space?
I always felt like I was in outer space, like in no space, until I had to ground myself, and I grounded myself to go back to the land, and it started my journey again from there to stitch it, to understand it in a different way, Grounding sometimes is necessary.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Steve, for taking the time and for this very inspiring session and very great imaginative artwork. It takes a while to really absorb what you showed us. It's almost like we need to bring you back a couple more times to go over it some more. It takes time to take all that in, and we've covered a lot of stuff in just like 1 hour here. And
like the old city of Jerusalem, you can go down different pathways and discover more and more about you.
I only saw the selection, by the way. These projects you looked at, there are like a selection of images from the project. So if you want to see the whole series, you have to look at the website. And I only showed the project relating to Palestine, but then there is the other art of mine that has different feel, a different look, even some nudity I did sometimes. So maybe just feel inspired to look at my On Earth project on my website. It's called On Earth. It's like one of these collages that that are close to my heart. It's about life. You asked me about Berlin and why I like Berlin. One of them is about the Berlin reality, and I created a work that really lives in the imagination, because this is, I always say, the best 10 years of my life have been spent in Berlin, where I enjoyed totally my being, my freedom, the place, the people around me, and everything beautiful in life. So I wanted to mirror that beauty in one artwork. It's called On Earth. You can see it in my website.
excellent. All right. Thank you again, Steve. And thank you, Krista. Thanks to our audience on Zoom and our audience on Facebook. The recording of this session has been made on Facebook, and once we hang up, you'll be able to go to Facebook and listen to the show anytime you want to and share it with your friends. Thanks again to everyone, and as we say at the end, ma salama, goodbye.
Thank you,
thank you so much.
Thank you, Plus Museum, and everyone who has been listening to us. Love and light from Berlin, and to everyone.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Thank you so much, Steve.
Bye-bye.
All the best.